All right, everybody, welcome back. Happy Friday. This is Along the Watchtower. Today is January 29th, right? It is the 29th, I believe. Yeah, Friday, January 29th, 2021. Um, yeah, we're here. We're still alive, still breathing. We have gone through about the first 9 days. He was inaugurated on the 20th, so we have the first 9 days, right? A 1/10 of the first 100 days, and I don't know. I mean, it's been fun. It's only been 10 days. It cannot much. I mean, a lot has happened, but really, it's only set up the battle that is to come, and really has kind of right out the gate has given us insight into whether or not the political fortitude is there to proceed ahead and do what needs to be done, because we're not really interested in the business as usual, politics as usual. So we don't really want to hear the usual excuses. Oh, Republicans this, oh, blue dog Democrats that. Yeah, it's like, well, here's the problem, is that all of you, well, not all of you, most of you, other than the Progressive Caucus within the Democrats, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, the Progressive Caucus, the only people really that seem to have their fingers on the pulse of decency and humanity. Like, it's amazing to me. You can't, other than people falling dead on the floor from like hemorrhagic fever, you can't have a greater emergency than a pandemic that has like a tempered mortality rate, right? So yes, people are dying. Yes, millions of people have died. Yes, people continue to die. But again, this isn't Songbird. We don't have a 54% mortality rate. So why not do what needs to be done to curtail what could happen, right? Or what could worsen as a result of, let's say, the mortality rate increasing. Or even without the mortality rate increasing, we talk every day about millions and millions of people being affected as collateral damage as a result of the lockdowns. Now, the argument of whether you're for lockdowns is a completely, like, it's a different one. We're not trying to have that right now. Because the point is there's people suffering, and things need to be done in order to rectify. There's 1, 2, and 3 waves things, and there's immediacy towards people who are homeless, towards people who have lost their medical care because they've lost their jobs, people who are food insecure. Those need to be addressed immediately, right? These are things that, like, increases in SNAP, immediate an expedition in the stimulus talks and a larger stimulus package. Those things would help them immediately. Not only that, but we would have an injection of this money into the economy. As we know, once we get money on a consumer level, we just go out and buy things. We buy things that we need. We buy things we don't need. That is also a different discussion altogether. But the point is that the economy could use it. So there are multiple reasons why budget reconciliation is not only the most effective, but really the necessary approach. And we don't see that will, that fortitude, that conviction coming out of the White House currently. But again, it's only been 9 days. It's only been 9 days, 10 days. So I don't, want to jump the gun, but that is the reality. All we kept hearing was, the audacity of the Trump administration and Trump himself was something that we can no longer tolerate. That's true. So we need to get back to doing things the way that we used to. That we could hold off on. We don't need to turn the clock back that far. You know what I mean? But here we are. Alas, it's not really an I told you so moment, because I'm pretty sure everyone saw it coming. But we're trying to be hopeful. Like, that's the whole point, is to be hopeful. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So here we are. Excuse me. I don't want to focus too much on the battle of the Wall Street short sellers, battle of the short sellers. It's going on. It's ongoing. It is, the markets had closed. It's 8:44. So I actually just kind of woke up from a nap. And I didn't mean to sleep past close, but the point is that short sellers still have issues, at least with GameStop. And I think even with stocks like AMC, despite the fact that Robinhood, I'm not sure about other brokerages and their applications, but Robinhood has restricted the purchasing of shares and options contracts for really the entirety of the short seller list. we mentioned yesterday that all the meme stocks is the list of the largest shorted stocks on the market, the greatest shorted stocks on the market. And so they've restricted the ability for retail investors to purchase mass shares and contracts. Literally, for like AMC, you can purchase one share. Yeah, one share, 10 options contracts. They are pulling out all the stops, and yet it still persists. GameStop, I haven't checked GameStop, but it's still in the triple digits, well above what it was. So, you know, and here's the thing. Here's the fascinating thing for me is that there's okay. Here's the thing is that the tactics that they're using on the market to try and scare retail investors into selling so that the stock doesn't push up, they have to cough out money for the options contracts that they put out for cheap strike prices and premiums, for low strike prices and cheap premiums. They got to pay out for those. They didn't think they were going to pay out because they didn't think that GameStop was going to, last and survive, even though their market fundament. And that's the thing. The market fundamentals supported GameStop. This is why deep fucking value is now a multi-millionaire. He was touting GameStop back in 2019, and nobody really bought into it because, the brick and mortar stores are going by the wayside. True, but GameStop, I guess, had enough within them to shore themselves up and last, and then some, be boosted by the console wars. So when he was taking out option contracts out on GameStop, betting that they were going to, and I don't know what his strike price was. It had to be something absurdly low for him to now be a multimillionaire. I mean, his numbers are like $48 million, something absurd. He's a multimillionaire, and he's the only one. He followed his conviction. And I always respect people who follow their conviction, as long as you're not harming others or undermining, yourself or anyone else. Follow your heart. Follow what moves you, what you believe in, for sure. That's what it means to be a person and to take command of your own agency, But and so yeah, it's still in the triple digits. There's still people making money off of it. AMC did close above 9, so short sellers did have to pay out those contracts that had strike prices above 9, which a majority of them did. Apparently, that's where the volatility was. And $70 billion in counting has been removed from the market due to short sellers having massive, and in the case of GameStop, it was like 130% shorted. So it was more shorted than stocks than actual shares available, which is illegal. It's massively illegal. So let's not forget, this is not like a massive story, and the underpinning of which is like David and Goliath, little man versus the big guy. So the big guy gets all of their friends, the applications and the avenues that the little guy uses to buy shares to shut it down, goes on the media, says, oh my God, this could be from Russia, and just like tries to, just act belligerent about the whole matter, goes and calls the White House and gets Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen involved. Oh yeah, she's monitoring the situation, right? And all they're trying to do is simply buy the stock in the hopes that it goes up so that they can make a little money too. There's illegalities going on. Obviously, there's been illegalities. The whole point of this, all of what they're doing is illegal. But on top of everything else, the underpinning of this is that they wouldn't have lost so much money if they didn't illegally short the stock beyond the amount of shares that it owns. It was 130% shorted. So, like, you're bad if you lose 1.7 billion. What you're doing was illegal. So, I digress. That's the monologue. Please like, share, and subscribe if you appreciate what I'm doing. Trying to do it big, man. Yeah. No. Seriously though, there's a lot going on in the world, and I hope you find it interesting. I find it fascinating, and we'll continue to explore it together. You, I, and all of us, all 4 of us. But anyway, let's get into it. I never got to this poll. Media trust hits a new low. It's short and sweet and to the point. Axios usually is. Is my NewsGuard active? You gotta pay for fucking NewsGuard. No. How is Axios not submitted by NewsGuard? What? Well, wow. All right, brother. So anyway, the reputable source of Axios came out with a poll. This was actually back in January the 21st, but I never got to it. But it's no wonder, right? Media trust at an all-time low. Trust in traditional media has declined to an all-time low, and many new professionals are determined to do something about it. Why it matters. Faith in society's central institutions, especially in government and the media, is the glue that holds society together. That glue was visibly dissolving a decade ago and has now, for many millions of Americans, disappeared entirely. By the numbers, for the first time ever, fewer than half of all Americans have trust in traditional media, according to data from Edelman's annual Trust Barometer, shared exclusively with Axios. Trust in social media has hit an all-time low of 27%. 56% of Americans agree with the statement that journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. 58% think that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. When Edelman repolled Americans after the election, the figures had deteriorated even further, with 57% of Democrats trusting the media and only 18% of Republicans. It's interesting how when they, instead of trying to identify the overarching statistic after the election, how did Americans feel about everything that went down and the media's involvement, they drew it along partisan lines. Notice that anything that has anything to do with the election is always spoken about in partisan lines. There is never any dialogue about anything cohesive, concrete, constructive, or discerning, right, about anything regarding the election. It has to be a done deal, because revisiting any possibility of anything could, oh my God, it causes cognitive dissonance. Like, no, man, listen, we have a future to think about. And the reality of the matter is that for me, my position is always really about electronic voting and the issues that came about. I mean, there was a sitting council member that literally went to sleep. We read about this, went to sleep, was a loser, and then woke up and got a phone call and said, hey, you know what? There is a massive clerical error in the tech, and so you actually are the winner. Hey, congratulations. When you're having things like that repeated, not things of that nature, but actual clerical technical errors happening across the board repeatedly, all involving one company, so it's not like multiple companies, and it's one company, and there's one software. It's not difficult to do an audit. In fact, multiple were done. I believe the two that I read about on the show, one from the ASOG group, the American Security Operations Group, and the other of which I think was conducted, I want to say by the state of Michigan, but I'm not too sure. But they did find irregularities, and under Michigan law, they're supposed to be investigated. I mean, that's something I would want to do if I ran a little town and the little town had elections and there was, ballots maybe lost or miscounted by the automation machine. We would check the automation machine. If not for the sake of the current election, for every election that goes forward. Check the machines. When we, I don't understand. What was the name of the documentary? Hacking Democracy. How could you forget the name of the documentary? Hacking Democracy. Bernie Blackout, and American Blackout, and always Manufactured Consent. These are 4 documentaries, Manufactured Consent being about the construction of the narrative, the American narrative, by media, right? Noam Chomsky. Bernie Blackout, about the Democratic National Party, and the media, basically in this united front to undermine the campaign of Bernie Sanders, not once but twice in 2 elections. And the same thing done again, well, actually before, because Cynthia McKinney was 2008, going against Cynthia McKinney, who was trying to get representation for black voters in Ohio. So we see this time and time again. Hacking Democracy, of course, is about the electronic voting. The first time it was used in a national election and all the issues that came about during that. So, it's not new. It's certainly not new, because for me at least, it starts with Woodward, Bernstein, Deep Throat, the Pentagon Papers, and Vietnam, because technology and the media had finally met this precipice, right, where technology had caught up to the what's the word I'm looking for? Technology had become mobile. There it is. And we were able to transfer information from across the globe rapidly and utilize satellites for telecommunication, and the birth of the television was born. And once that happened, once we were able to have live video of the horrors of what goes on outside of the suburban home, the American dream, it changed really the reality of news and what it was that was supposed to be spoken of and how that could be manipulated. And that was the beginning of the end. And since then, it has been an ongoing battle by the Fifth Estate. Well, it used to be, and the government for disclosure, for transparency, for the truth, as it were, veritas. But now, with another twist of technology, the advent of social media, the death of print news, now it's all profit driven, and everyone knows that. Everyone knows it. 2020, really, the Trump presidency in 2020 in particular, these years, because again, we're staring on the precipice right now, and the next 5 years, if not decade, is setting the tone for how the world, how our culture will develop, and how it will be really for the next century, similar to what we saw with the Industrial Revolution and how the world changed between the Great War, the Spanish flu, the Second World War, right? So, and it's fascinating and it's scary and all these things, but I digress. Let's further read here. The big picture, says Axios, these numbers are echoed across the rest of the world. They're mostly not a function of Donald Trump's war on fake news. This is what I'm saying. The curtain has been revealed, right? With all of this garbage. And really, for me, it was kind of revealed under during the first election that the DNC undermined Bernie Sanders with, which I believe was because he didn't run again against Obama, and then so I think it was was it 08 or was it 20? Well, okay. Anyway, I digress. I always get that wrong. But the point is that the level of concerted effort that they threw out their own party, right, trying to remove him from debates, really literally not posting his poll results, when he was winning. And then they tried similar tactics again later on, but that didn't hold up so well. So they kind of the effort was redoubled, I will say, on a personal level. And so, they went after his supporters. They went after his character. Oh, he's a Russian agent. But as soon as he bowed out of the race, all of that went away. Same thing with Tulsi Gabbard. Same thing with Andrew Yang. It's it's the same thing with these people. And then it's like, don't get me wrong. Republicans aren't any better. They're all sharks. But it's unfortunate that the party that's supposed to be of the people is also just another party of sharks. That's why you follow what? You follow your principle. You follow good policy, never a politician, political party, or person. As vaccine rumor hunter. What the hell is that's not a thing. That's not a thing. As vaccine rumor hunter Heidi Larson put it, we don't have a misinformation problem. We have a trust problem. News organizations have historically relied mainly on advertising income, and as those dollars flow increasingly to Google and Facebook, that has created institutional weakness that has showed up in trust data. Reversing the decline is a monster task, and one that some journalists and news organizations have taken up themselves. They're going to need help, and perhaps from America's CEOs. Yeah, you think the rich shark executives are who is going to gain the trust of the broken populace? We are literally on message boards talking to each other, trying to figure out how to screw America's CEOs on Wall Street. I don't think it's going to be the CEOs that we want to listen to, but that's just me. Here's the catch. Mistrust of the media is now a central part of many Americans' personal identity. You fucking A right it is. An article of faith that they weren't argued into and can't be argued out of. This is correct. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that there isn't this blind trust in an organization that lied about weapons of mass destruction, that has been caught time and time again, literally lying and slandering about particular politicians, particular Oh God, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden. Where else? I'm just thinking. I keep going back to weapons of mass destruction because that's as far back as I can go. Any further, and I'm like 12 years old. I'm 10 years old. But I mean, how often do we hear about the media covering up? We can also go back to the Sinclair Media Group. I love that video. As eerie as it is, it's a direct referendum, if you were, of the parroting of the mockingbird situation that's going on within media, and that's just one aspect of it. What they're saying is that former Financial Times editor Lionel Barber talks of factual reporting as a means of regaining the trust of the reading public. Axios has a stated mission to help restore trust in fact-based news. Washington Post media columnist Margaret Sullivan writes that our goal should go beyond merely putting truthful information in front of the public. We should also do our best to make sure it's widely accepted. No, you don't need to skew anything to make sure it's accepted. If it is, then it is. If it isn't, then it isn't. That's the idea of news. We want the information, not some boxed, pre-approved concept that you hope will be digestible and palatable for us. This isn't, you don't get it. You've missed the plot. How it works: media outlets can continue to report reliable facts, but that won't turn the trend around on its own. What's needed is for trusted institutions to visibly embrace the news media. CEOs, aka the fourth branch of government, are at or near the top of Edelman's list of trusted institutions. That's fair. By the numbers, 61% of Trump voters say that they trust their employer's CEO. That compares to just 28% who trust government leaders and a mere 21% who trust journalists. What kind of nonsense? That's an interesting metric. Certainly. So I've actually mentioned this a few times. This is a political poll. More than half of Americans polled say that other Americans are the biggest threat to the nation. This paranoia, this heightened anxiety. We have two things going on. We have a narrative that's being thrown at us that, Americans hate each other. We're all divisive. It's usually going to be down politically partisan lines, usually down the Trump, anti-Trump thing. What's happening is that anyone who isn't a wholehearted supporter of, how the election went down in a multitude of ways, in a multitude of arguments being made, are suddenly kind of cropped up and put in a basket of QAnon and Trump supporters, and it's all just kind of a nightmarish mess that no one can really communicate through because of the social anxieties that come with it. To question is to think, is to suggest or insinuate something no one likes. But that may not be your intent, but that's what occurs, right? So without really the tools, the maturity, the really intellectual fortitude to sift through that, you either A, don't want to deal with it, or B, don't want to deal with it. So you just end up not dealing with it. You end up just kind of not talking about it. I still very much would like to speak about Dominion, but in particular. And you know what? I may have to dedicate some time to that next week to bring up again the gentleman who ended up, the councilman who ended up losing and then winning, etc., etc. But anyway, I digress. What ends up happening is if you don't trust the news and you don't trust each other, you don't trust Americans, you're stuck with the echo chamber. And that is inherently toxic, right? To have nothing but your own ideas thrown at you in your own sort of sycophantic support circle. It's not helpful. But let's read. More than half of Americans say the greatest danger to America's way of life comes from other fellow citizens, according to a CBS poll. A total of 54% of those surveyed say other people in America and domestic enemies pose the biggest threat. And here's the thing, with that anxiety and that idea in mind, you then instead of addressing something that sounds questionable, communicating that concern, you instead immediately demonize them. You instead immediately ostracize them. This is what happens when the lines of communication break down. We're seeing this across the board. And at this point in time, ahead of economic forces at 20%. So 54% think other Americans are the threat. Economic forces are at 20%. The natural world is at 17%, and foreign countries are at 8%. The category of natural world was a catch-all that included hazardous weather and other natural disasters, such as lethal viruses, and not to the corona. The most pessimistic respondents among those surveyed were age 65 and older. About two-thirds, 66%, saw their fellow Americans as the nation's greatest threat. There was not, however, much difference regardless of age group, between Democrats and Republicans, 53 and 56% respectively, nor a notable difference between men, 53 and 55% for women. So, two-thirds of Americans saw other Americans as their greatest threat. The most pessimistic, so two-thirds, 65 and older, saw Americans as their greatest threat. So these are people who went through World War II, right? So we're in 2021. So the 1960. So they are the children of baby boomers, right? Or are they baby boomers? You get what I'm saying. These are guys born in like 60, 61, 62. So they, saw Vietnam, and they saw, first a country united for and then against the war. They saw 9/11, right? And some of them probably 60. If they were born in 1960, no, because they would have been like 10, 15 years old in Vietnam. So no, but yeah, they this level of animosity usually was turned towards the government, both in Vietnam, both towards the Gulf War, then against Operation Iraqi Freedom. Let's see what else. There was not, however, much difference between the Democrats and Republicans, 53, 56%, or men and women, 53, 55%. So it's a pretty broad grouping here that is indicative of the sort of in grouping animosity, right? And all the echo chamber is going to do is feed into that. But I mean, yeah, are you surprised? I mean, I'm certainly not. Let's talk about where some of that animosity come from. Sheriff deputy's burial turned away from whites only cemetery, right? So critical race theory certainly probably is not helping. My mother is a great advocate, a great fan of history. And when we would talk about history, when we would talk about war, and we would talk about Africa, we would talk about Egypt, we would talk about its importance, it was never from the perspective of black supremacy. It was never from there was never this sense of fierce animosity. However, there was an acknowledgement of a lost history, of a culture gone, and in order to honor that, we had to build that here and now, and that required education. That required being better, doing better for yourself. She was a big advocate of just making sure that she got her students what they needed in order to be able to go to school. She worked for SU. But I digress. Point is that in order to destroy the pyramid, you don't want to invert the pyramid. You hear this often. Let's invert the pyramid. It was like, no, I thought the whole idea was to remove the hierarchy altogether. That, although hierarchies are natural, they're natural. You have hierarchies of merit, right? If I'm better at you than something, it will show naturally, as we both do. For example, if we're both carpenters, we both build boxes, but I'm a better carpenter, it will show in my work. And naturally, I by that metric should ascend up the ladder sooner than you. But I digress. The point is, I thought the whole idea was to get rid of the hierarchy system, right? So that we could all be on the even playing field. If you don't want that, then all you want because it's one or the other. Either you want to get rid of the hierarchy system so we can all be in an even playing field, or you just want power yourself. You can't, there's no, you know what I mean? There's no, and it's just like, at that point, you're just a up and coming oppressor. No, thank you. But anyway, a sheriff's deputy's wife in Ohio said that she was banned from burying her husband in the local cemetery as a result of a racist whites only policy. Allen Parish Deputy Daryl Simeon, who was diagnosed with cancer in December, had requested to be buried in Oakland Springs Cemetery, Oberlin, prior to his death so that he could remain close to his home. However, when his wife inquired about buying a plot following her husband's death on Sunday, the cemetery told her that it only allows certain races to be buried there. It was in their bylaws that the cemetery was whites only. That's a madness. I didn't think they still had something like that. I just kind of looked at her and she said there's no coloreds allowed. Oh my god. But the response to that, right? The response to that isn't to go and make a black only or a minority only. That's not the response. That's the lesson. That's the key. The response is to expose this shit for what it is and get this shit changed. You can't fight fire with fire. That doesn't, despite how cool that is, fight fire with fire, it's not effective over the long run. That doesn't put out the fire. In the future, when you have children and your children have children, do you want them to still have to deal with this fight? Do you want them to still be carrying this on? I thought the idea was to eliminate the ideology itself, eliminate where this comes from. You don't have to deal with it anymore. No one does. And yeah, it all just seems like people are just short-sighted and selfish. And this shit is ridiculous. But you put this shit in its place where it is, and it goes where it belongs. You don't respond with doing something like it, because then someone else is like, oh, you think you just have black folks that blah 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 blah. Let me have a Seminole only fucking. Let me have an Inuit only. And it's like, you know what? Do you? But then now we all have our own little enclaves, and that's not multicultural. That's not integration. That's madness. That's more in-grouping. I didn't even know this shit. But then again, there's still lynching going on. There's still people being put on slave blocks, like in the Sudan. I'm not, see, in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, thanks, Barack. But it's like, it was happening before him. He only exacerbated the situation. Liberia, he only exacerbated. It was like, well, that's actually arguable. But no, we're not going to go into like Liberian Civil War. We don't need to go there. Another day. All right. Sorry about that. Had some technical difficulties. What else is new? Let's see here. Where was I? Oh, yes. Montana brothers who accosted lone black cop during Capitol riots are charged. I love the phrasing. Gotta love the phrase. Like, lone black cop. He's the lone cop. It doesn't matter that he's black. He's just the lone cop. I don't think anybody cared that he was a black dude at the time of an entire riot going on. Two Montana brothers accused of being among the first 10 people to storm the Capitol before chasing a lone black cop. That's kind of, I don't like that. That's kind of racist. Through the building and wreaking havoc inside the Senate chamber have been charged. Josh and his brother Jared Hughes have been charged with a slew of offenses, including obstruction of an official proceeding, destruction of property, and entering the Capitol without authorization. The brothers are among more than 150 rioters who have been charged for the January 6th insurrection, including several members of far-right organizations and former law enforcement officials. Prosecutors were blah, 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 and the lone guy. Okay. So, yeah, you know, some folks on the right and, you know, guys who chased the lone black cop. But then there's the BLM activist who was armed with a knife and egged on the mob during the siege of the Capitol is freed on bail, despite prosecution pleading for him to remain behind bars and arguing that he thrives on chaos. So what's happening here, right? You do have like a cracking down on Antifa, because BLM I don't believe is in Portland right now, or was in Portland. You don't really see BLM. I haven't really seen BLM at all. I haven't really heard from them. No protests or anything. Despite a lot of the news coming out about like Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor, the resulting what should be prosecutions not occurring and them just getting fired. It's struck nothing. Nothing's happened. I guess this guy just got. He needed to be somewhere. Needed to do something. But yeah, we're not seeing, and you know, as far as I have read, and as far as I've seen, this is the only BLM member that has been was arrested and charged John Earl Sullivan, 26, entered the Capitol building. The left-wing activist, who has previously participated in BLM demonstrations, claimed he was simply documenting the event. He was interviewed by Anderson Cooper on CNN afterward, where it was implied that he was passively observing the situation. However, Sullivan was later arrested and charged after video footage appeared to show him inciting rioters. He made his first court appearance on Friday after being detained in Utah. He was released on bail under strict conditions. Sullivan is already facing rioting and criminal mischief charges stemming from a Black Lives Matter protest in Utah. So the lady who, for example, stole Pelosi's laptop, she was let out, right? But she didn't commit violence, but she stole sensitive material. See, it's just, John Earl Sullivan, told CNN he entered the Capitol last Wednesday to merely document, was later arrested as its video showed him egging on the rioters. Sullivan has been charged with one court count of knowingly entered to blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we read that already. On Friday, he appeared via Zoom from a jail cell in Utah for his first court hearing. A judge granted Sullivan bail on strict conditions despite a prosecutor pleading for him to remain behind bars until after the inauguration. As part of his release, Sullivan has been ordered to stay, this was obviously a few weeks ago, has been ordered to stay inside his home in Utah, not travel to any protests, whether locally or in D.C. He will have to surrender his passport and avoid communication with any witnesses or co-defendants. 26-year-old activist has been additionally ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation and is prohibited from possessing weapons. The judge noted that Sullivan's father had removed firearms from his home. The prosecution pleaded for Sullivan to remain behind bars until after Inauguration Day, arguing he poses a risk to public safety and that he thrives on chaos. The judge denied the motion, saying that a man did not meet the threshold under Utah bail reform amendments. However, the judge agreed to the prosecution's request for Sullivan to stay off social media. The left-wing activist frequently shares posts on Instagram and uploads videos to YouTube. Why isn't he taken off social media? Oh, but he's banned from social media. But why doesn't social media ban his account? I believe that was something that we read briefly, that his account was still up. According to a release by the DOJ, Sullivan, wearing a ballistics vest and gas mask, entered the U.S. Capitol through a window that had been broken out, pushing past Capitol Police once inside. He filmed multiple videos of the event before posting them to YouTube under his username JadenX. In one of the clips, he's seemingly heard encouraging other rioters as they enter the building. "We gotta get this shit burned," he purportedly states before adding, "It's our house, mother." Elsewhere in his recorded clips, he says to rioters, "You guys are the effing savage. Let's go. This shit is ours. F yeah, I can't see. This is what I mean. This is what I mean. This is the double standard. This is a prime target for what they claim a lot of the idiots who just literally went in there and I'm not justifying any of it. I want an even hand, okay? This is about, I shouldn't have to explain this. This is the worst part, is feeling gaslit by the fact that you have to break down, hey, I just want there to be justice. Should I have to explain everything being even-handed as far as proportionate response, as far as carrying out prosecution and punishment, as far as whether leniency should be given because one person's BLM and one isn't, one person's Antifa and one isn't? I'm not going to waste my time with that. One of the Proud Boys who stormed the Capitol had instructions for making guns and bombs in his home. They're all crazy. That's the point. That's the entire point that I'm always trying to make. They're all zealots. Left, right, up, down. An extremist is an extremist is an extremist is an extremist. And I'm not in support of curtailing free speech to subjugate myself to security theater for the sake of extremists. Really for the sake of anyone, but mainly for the sake of the government. Because what happened to the 50 riots that were supposed to happen across all the capitals? Why is there still thousands and thousands of guards, National Guardsmen at D.C.? I don't, and we've covered Robin Hood. We've covered the SEC releasing we haven't actually covered this. They released an official statement on recent market volatility owing to GameStop and AMC price pumping, which is basically, everyone's just saying, we're monitoring the activity, we're monitoring the situation, because there's nothing illegal going on the side of the Redditors. They literally just everyone on there was like, yeah, we're just going to buy these stocks. That's why it's fascinating that everyone is speaking the rhetoric to cause the fear, even though nothing illegal is being done. Let's go into COVID. Lasai. More than 50 Democrats call for recurring stimulus checks in the next COVID relief bill. You know, what is there to say? The COVID relief bill is being diminished as we speak. That's why we read about, them needing to take until March because Biden is bipartisan curious. Sorry, that was not on purpose. One of the things is more targeted. When they say words like more targeted, that always means more diminished. President Joe Biden is urging the swift passage of a coronavirus bill that will provide $1,400 checks, not $2,000, to most Americans. But even as Democrats work to bring legislation to the floor as early as next week, some progressives feel Biden's plan doesn't go too far. In fact, more than 50 Democrats recently sent a letter to the president urging him to include recurring relief payments in the bill. Progressive Democrats want ongoing relief for struggling Americans, and in the letter to the vice president and the president drafted was under the leadership of Ilhan Omar of the Squad. See, more than 50 progressives serving in the House of Representatives signed it, including well-known figures such as AOC and Pramila Jayapal, Congressional Progressive Caucus chairwoman. The letter states the stunning financial crisis for those at the bottom of the income ladder demands massive relief for those who need it most. I mean, it's not going to happen, because while they're calling for recurring checks, there's calls for more targeted relief. And what do you think is going to win out if he's looking to be bipartisan? What do you think Republicans are going to respond to more? Money every month or less money to less people? More importantly, even some moderate Democrats are sure to object to recurring payments. Some of the more conservative senators on the left have called for the next relief bill to be more targeted and limited in scope. The Democrats have just 50 votes in the Senate at the moment. That means they will either need 10 Republicans to cross the aisle to reach the 60-vote threshold that can overcome a filibuster that would block the passage of a bill, or they will need 51 votes, including the vice president and all the members of the caucus, to pass the bill through budget reconciliation. And that's it. If they don't get the 10 Republicans and they don't get rid of the filibuster, then that's it. That's it. And that's the problem with being bipartisan curious. The Biden administration still hopes to get Republican support for blah, blah, blah. Not going to happen. Cuomo announces when indoor dining can resume in New York City. Even as... I'm going to do a little stretch here. Excuse me. Excuse me. Even as we see them talk about the UK variant probably being the dominant variant of coronavirus in America, and then subsequently saying, oh yeah, that UK variant that we said wasn't going to be or isn't more deadly, it's just more contagious. Well, it seems it actually could be more deadly. It seems it actually could be more deadly. So not only is there a more contagious variant going around that could possibly be deadlier, right? That's the thing here. That's the thing I talk about we watch for, right? More extreme symptomatic expression and a higher mortality rate. If this bad boy's got that higher mortality rate, that's a big duck and cover, okay? All right? And then you have Biden lifting the European ban, but he instituted a South African ban. Not ban, a restricted travel ban. It's just like the things don't add up. So there's a more contagious, deadlier, possibly deadlier variant at a time where there's possibly increased travel now that the travel restriction has been lifted. And now you want to open things? The behavior doesn't scream an emergency situation. All right. And it's like, well, why now? Gee golly, what's changed? I wonder which. Oh, there's a new guy in office. Right. But, this isn't, none of this is political. Not at all. Not even close, right? New York restaurants will be allowed to open to 25% capacity beginning on Valentine's Day. That's a big day. It's a big cash cow. You got to take your lady out to dinner. Lady, gentleman, whatever. You got to take your boo, whatever boo you got. Cuomo said the city went from 7.1% positivity in January to 4.9% now, and that the current models project those numbers will continue to drop, even though there's hypothetically increased travel and a more contagious variant that's possibly deadlier. All right. I mean, okay, sure, all right. Statewide, the positivity rate stands at 4.65%, the lowest since December 11th. I'm guessing that's with the previous variant and not the current UK strain. I'm just guessing. Which Cuomo said was the start of the post-Thanksgiving holiday surge, yada, 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 yada. We'll see how this turns out. I mean, it hasn't happened yet. It doesn't happen until February. We still have about 2 weeks to see the continuing impact of the UK variant in America. We'll see. We always just keep watch, right? Along the watchtower. EU regulator authorizes AstraZeneca vaccine for all adults. Regulators authorized AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine for use in adults throughout the European Union on Friday amid criticism the bloc is not moving fast enough to vaccinate its population. The European Medicines Agency Expert Committee unanimously recommended the vaccine to be used in people 18 and over, although concerns had been raised last week that not enough data exists to prove it works in older people, and some countries indicated that it may not give it to the elderly. The shot is the third vaccine given the green light by the European Medicines Agency after Pfizer and Moderna. The EMA's decision requires final approval from the European Commission, a process that occurred swiftly with the other vaccines. So good for them. I'm an advocate of availability and having the option. While trials showing about 60% efficacy, the vaccine appears to offer less protection than ones already authorized, but experts have said any vaccine with an efficacy rate over 50% could help stop outbreaks. I don't know about that, because is the is the byproduct of taking it worth 50%, 60% efficacy? The agency recommended the vaccine's use by older people despite limited data regarding its efficacy in people over 55, citing the immune responses seen and experienced with other vaccines. So if you're just giving people something just to give them something, if you've already have 2 vaccines approved, why are you doing this? I mean, yes, they will make a lot of money from that. But could that possibly have something to do with it? I don't know. Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine is 72% effective in the U.S. and 66% overall in large trials. So we're basically seeing from all the other companies what we initially were seeing the results for the trials were for like Pfizer and Moderna back around a month before they got approved. Because remember, we were reading reading articles from October saying, Moderna CEO says that we're probably not going to have a vaccine by the end of the month. Right now we're seeing 80% efficacy. We're seeing 75% efficacy. And then all of a sudden, November rolls around. Gee golly, we got it. We got it, guys. It's election time. Be happy. We're going to get a new guy in office. We're going to have we got it. We got to get approval. So, none of it's political, obviously. None of it is profit driven, obviously. And these other companies, just everyone else got it wrong. They're just not as good. I don't know. Johnson & Johnson on Friday said its single-dose vaccine was 72% effective in preventing COVID-19 in the United States, but a lower rate of 66% was observed globally in the large trial conducted across 3 continents and against multiple variants. In the trial of nearly 44,000 volunteers, the level of protection against moderate and severe COVID-19 was 66% in Latin America and just 57% in South Africa, where a particularly worrying variant of the novel virus is circulating. Those results compare to the high bar set by 2 authorized vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna, which were around 95% effective in preventing symptomatic illness in pivotal trials when given in 2 doses. Those trials, however, were conducted mainly in the U.S. and before the broad spread of new variants now under the spotlight. J&J's main goal was the prevention of moderate to severe COVID-19, and the vaccine was 85% effective in stopping severe disease and preventing hospitalization across all geographies and against multiple variants 28 days after immunization. That level of prevention will potentially protect hundreds of millions of people from serious and fatal outcomes. So, the future's being looked at because they're concerned about the mutations. And this is the thing. Now is not the time for anything but just a sigh of relief that there's acknowledgement. All right, we're going to have to deal with this for the long term. So we need to get things moving in order, and we need to consider mutations. We need to consider a gain of function by this disease and it mutating and having a worse symptomatic expression. We need to think about vaccinations being effective in the future. CDC reports community spread of South African variant Johnson & Johnson single-shot vaccine found to be safe. J&J's one-shot vaccine protects against COVID-19. While it is not as effective as other vaccines already authorized, it appears to be extremely effective against severe disease. J&J said Friday that the data from its large-scale trial, 66% effectiveness, is pretty much the same stuff. We also were reading that Moderna's was it Moderna or Pfizer? I think it was Moderna. Was pretty confident that their variant would be able to combat the mutation. They're not worried. But exclusive, Biden to impose South Africa travel ban to combat new COVID-19 variant. He did, let me make sure, let me double check. Biden lifts European ban. Or did he? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So he did keep the European ban in place. Okay. He rejected Trump's move to lift the ban. All right. Because I knew something was, but still. So it's good that he is, I guess, he's doing what he can. He's trying to restrict the inward, the communication, the communicability of the disease, the new variant. But still, if it's here, why are you guys, if it's here and you're worried about a higher mortality rate and it's higher and it's more contagious, why are you allowing Democratic governors and mayors to open shit up? That's counterintuitive. Just going by your previous behavior and the motivation behind it, the motivation should be more so now. But, here's the whole thing. You're thinking, oh, we have a vaccine, right? But we just read about a vaccine efficacy against the new variant, at least for Johnson & Johnson. Moderna's, they're super, super confident. But the civilian populace at large doesn't start getting in until the spring. So you're opening things up, I would say prematurely, if that were the case. You'd want a good circulation of the populace to have the vaccine within them, other than just first-line workers and some of the elderly. You'd want the majority of the populace that interacts with each other, right? Because the elderly has been shut off. And first responders, don't consist of the majority, like first responders, medical workers, they don't consist of the majority of the populace. But let's read about the ban. President Joe will impose a ban on most non-U.S. citizens entering the country who have recently been to South Africa starting Saturday. This was on the 24th, it's about a week ago. In a bid to contain the spread of the new variant of COVID-19. Biden on Monday is also reimposing an entry ban on nearly all non-U.S. travelers who have been to Brazil, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and 26 countries in Europe that allow travel across open borders. We're adding South Africa to the list because of the concerning variant present that has already spread beyond South Africa, and as Fauci said, could already be here. So Walmart doing something decent. They're going to offer 7-day COVID vaccine service at U.S. pharmacies. Walmart said that at full capacity, we expect to be able to deliver 10 to 13 million doses per month when supply allocations allow. Of course, their shares edged higher. This was last Friday after they said they would be offering a 7-day-a-week COVID vaccine service at U.S. pharmacies. Again, none of this is profit-driven. That's totally philanthropic. I actually can appreciate that. Kind of. Because, of course, we do have the case of we read that a few months ago, of the pharmacist giving out the opioid prescriptions, the expired opioid prescriptions that had to go through Walmart in order for them, they had to be verified by Walmart. And so Walmart was caught like kind of with their pants down because they didn't verify the expiration, and they didn't take notice of the volume in which he was doing it. So, Walmart is Walmart. Corporations are corporations. But, people got short memories. It is what it is. 22-year-old CEO of Philadelphia's mass vaccination program admits to stealing doses for friends. We're seeing this across the board. We just read about that rich couple that flew, what was it, Australia, New Zealand? They flew somewhere, or was it in the Philippines? No. Where was it? I forgot where it was. I'm all over the world. I'm all over the place. But this rich couple, it was a casino. He was a casino executive, and his wife, Karina, or whatever her name is. One of those archetypical arm trophy wife names. And again, I'm not judging the relationship. I don't give a shit. But it's one of these archetypical scenarios where you see the rich guy and his trophy wife fly to this small town that has, it's so small it still has its indigenous populace there. And the elderly are getting vaccinated, so they pose as healthcare workers to get vaccinated. These fucking scumbags. But if anything, like I continue to say, the class war is being presented in front of our eyes. We are seeing the machinations of how the wealthy remain wealthy through this battle, through the battle of the short sellers. We're seeing how power really works, okay, through the last election. Whether it be the primary, the national primary, or through the individual party primaries, and things like what the Democratic Party did to people like Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, and Bernie Sanders. Okay, we're seeing what happens in an emergency, in a crisis, how government responds, and whether or not they actually give a shit about our well-being, which it seems like they don't. If anything, what 2020 and forward will show us, will unveil, is the inner workings of our institutions. Now, whether or not we respond to that, to do something to change it effectively, that is another story altogether, obviously. But let's read here, coming to the bottom of the show. The city has cut ties with Philly Fighting COVID after the group switched to a for-profit model and adopted a policy that would have allowed them to sell personal data. The city of Philadelphia has cut ties with Philly Fighting COVID, a startup that promised to revolutionize vaccine distribution, but the effort instead became what one volunteer nurse described as a disaster, she told the WAPO. Philly Fighting COVID, a self-described group of college kids, was awarded a contract from the city to help vaccinate people against COVID despite having next to no healthcare experience. The group's CEO, Andre Doroshin, a 22-year-old graduate student, gained attention when he started 3D printing free face shields for healthcare workers at the start of the pandemic, and formed Philly Fighting COVID over the summer to run pop-up testing sites with his friends. On January 8th, in collaboration with city officials, the group opened Philadelphia's largest mass vaccination site, and chaos ensued. Philly Fighting COVID began as a non-profit but switched to for-profit model allegedly without telling the city, and said that they were going to start billing insurance providers for administering the vaccine doses, even though they received them for free. However, charging Medicare and private insurers for administration of the vaccine is reportedly permitted by the FDA. They were bragging about how rich they were going to get, a former volunteer told the outlet of the group's leaders. Doroshin denies those allegations. They also added a private policy that would have allowed the group to sell personal data they collected from the people they vaccinated, though Doroshin said the policy was a mistake and that the group never sold the data. Still, the group continued operating and instructed people eligible for the vaccine to sign up online, but on January 23rd, the line to get the vaccine stretched outside the vaccination site as people waited for hours for their appointment, only to be turned away after learning that the site had been overbooked. There were literally 85, 90-year-old people standing there in tears with printed appointment confirmations saying, "I don't understand why I can't get vaccinated. I'm 85. Later that day, despite turning people away, Philly Fighting COVID ended up with extra doses. Katrina Lipinski, a 29-year-old nurse at the vaccination site, told why. She said that she saw Doroshin put the extra doses into his bag. They ended the day with a significant number of unused vaccines. Andre walked pretty openly from the vaccine area over to his belongings and packaged maybe 10 to 15 in his bag with CDC record cards. A few hours later, a photo reportedly of Doroshin administering doses to a person at a private home allegedly spread on Snapchat. He initially declined to comment, but in an interview with Today on Thursday, Dorshin admitted to taking 4 doses home and inoculating his friends despite his lack of medical qualifications. He told Today that he had, however, undergone internal certifications, whatever that means. Dorshin claimed that the group had called everyone we knew and to try and give doses to people at higher risk of severe COVID illness and more in need of the vaccine, but gave them to his younger friends instead because the doses were about to expire. Not surprising. Not surprising. We're going to finish up here. We already talked about we'll talk about the nursing facilities tomorrow in a fuller scope. Prescription drug prices in the United States are 2.56 times those in other countries. And that's after we read just recently that companies that were actually part of Operation Warp Speed, like Pfizer and Moderna, had raised their drug prices on certain drugs. But we're going to finish up with this. Vaccinated congressmen test positive for the virus. Let's be real about ours. A Massachusetts congressman who had received both doses of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine had tested positive. The office for the representative of Stephen Lynch said Friday that the lawmaker had a negative test result before attending Biden's inauguration. The office says Lynch's positive test result came after a staff member in his Boston office tested positive earlier this week. A statement said Lynch isn't displaying any symptoms of COVID-19. Lynch will self-quarantine. Lynch is the second member of the state's congressional delegation to test positive in many days. On Thursday, Representative Lori Trahan announced she had tested positive after repeatedly testing negative. Let's finish this because I think this is interesting. The Fauci sees vaccination for kids by late spring or the summer. Johnson & Johnson one-dose shot appears to prevent the virus, but less than some others, which makes it useless. I love how they lead with it seems to do something, but definitely less than the other ones. WHO team visits Wuhan hospital that had early coronavirus patients. Dubai blamed by several countries for spreading the coronavirus abroad after the city welcomed New Year's revelers. And Philadelphia's problematic vaccine rollout raises larger questions. The only thing I can think of is that he got the shot while already being infected. But I mean, yeah, he got this but they have rapid tests. They have 15-minute tests. So that's peculiar. Then again, it doesn't surprise me that, government functions inadequately. Surprise there, right? But yeah, we are at the end of the show. Please like, share, and subscribe if you dig what I'm doing. And yeah, please be well to yourself and to each other. Have a great weekend.